Well, thank you all for coming here. We're going to be talking this morning about brands and the changes that are happening to brands, certainly with the explosion of digital media of all sorts. With me, I have Jack Martin, who's the chairman of Hill Norton. And I believe we have Rory Sutherland, who is from Ogilvy in the UK. Wasn't able to join us, so he will share some of his thoughts with us by video. The world of branding is certainly changing from the traditional era of mass communications and advertising of brands primarily built on TV advertising to a place where with digital media there is a lot of power that is given to the consumer in terms of seeking information about brands, in terms of getting a lot of information or sharing a lot of information with other consumers about the performance or the reviews of brands, and about pricing. A lot of the marketing that, a lot of the purpose of marketing is to build premium brands and to be able to build premium pricing. And certainly in a lot of cases, the consumer is now armed with a lot of price information that makes it a little bit more difficult to control pricing the way it was before. And that's a challenge for both owners of brands as well as retailers or distributors. So what I'm going to do is, Comscore is a company that measures the internet and focuses on consumer behavior and what consumers do when they go online, whether it is just using a regular PC or whether you're using a tablet or whatever. And then we also are able to see what kind of advertising they're exposed to. And as a result, we're able to find out if advertising is in fact working for them and what are the dynamics that's affecting the digital landscape. So I thought I would start with sharing with you some of the lessons that we have learned from over 10 years of analyzing digital media, and particularly what has been emerging in the last couple of years. The first question that a lot of people have is, does digital advertising build brands? And we get this question all the time. I think traditional marketers have always been conditioned to think that the way you build your brands is either through putting pictures of your brands and ads through glossy magazines, or to build them by advertising on TV. And there is also a lot of skepticism about whether a banner ad or a rich media ad can actually build your brand given the limited amount of time or fleeting amount of time that people have in terms of looking at your brand. And so one of the things that we do is we actually measure whether digital advertising can actually increase sales. Now, increasing sales is not quite exactly the same as building a brand, but ultimately the proof of the pudding in terms of whether advertising works is, does it help you increase sales? And so what we do is we look at people and whether they are exposed to online advertising, and we also look at whether their sales at supermarkets that are kind of measured by scanners at the supermarket, whether sales go up when people are exposed to online advertising. And the finding is that, yes, it does increase sales. Here is a chart where we have looked at over a couple of hundred campaigns, and when we look at the correlation between exposure to advertising versus what we call lift in sales, so that's the percent increase in sales relative to the absence of advertising, what we find is that on this chart, we have broken campaigns into what campaigns have had zero effect, 1 to 10%, 11 to 20%, et cetera. And what you see is that the zero effect is only 18% of the campaign. So what does that mean is that 82% actually we have seen a positive result. And the average lift that we see is about 22%. Now that's a pretty surprising number. This is among people who are exposed. But in some cases, it turns out that some of the advertising that we see has some kind of a value message or an incentive. And usually when you combine advertising with some kind of a promotional incentive, that tends to juice up the effect of advertising. But nevertheless, in terms of proof of does online advertising work, this is pretty good. And in fact, when we compare it to TV impact, and we take an average campaign that has a 40% reach among its target audience, there were some studies about 20 years ago that were done about the effectiveness of TV advertising, and the average lift that we find in terms of increase in sales was about 8%. The internet on an apple-to-apple basis is about 9%, so it's actually compares pretty favorably as far as the ultimate result in terms of return on investment. So now, when we look at the different forms of advertising, you have search and display, and you also have a lot of social advertising. There is a third dimension of advertising, which is mobile and local, which I'm not going to be able to talk about because it's still nascent and we don't know a lot about it. So here's a study again that we have gathered across a bunch of campaigns. When we look at people who use display only versus people who are advertising using search only, versus actually people who are exposed to both search and display. And the first chart here would basically tell you, not surprisingly, that search is, certainly in comparison to display, is very powerful, 82% lift compared to 16% lift. But you also find that when we look at the combination of the two, when somebody is exposed to the two, there is a lot of synergy, and it's almost 120% effect. Now, the big difference is that search it only affects people who are actually conducting a search on that particular brand, and not everybody is conducting a search. And so if we look at campaigns that have encompassed both a display campaign as well as a search campaign, what we find is that the vast majority of people, the way they're exposed through display rather than search. So 81% are exposed just through display, and then the rest are exposed through either search or a combination of search and display. So what does that mean? What that means is that even though search is very, very effective, it's probably the most effective medium that was ever created because it is giving you information at the time when you're looking for a particular product or something that fills your need. in terms of the number of people that you're reaching, is pretty limited. And if you want to reach more people, you need to supplement it with display. And in fact, when we do look at total sales, which takes into account both the individual increase from advertising as well as the number of people who are reached, you find that the combination basically says that a pretty significant portion is really driven by those lonely banners or a combination of lonely banners and display. So the bottom line is that, not surprising, search wins on sales lift, display wins on reach, and the two are very, very synergistic when you are able to do them. The last thing that I want to talk about is social advertising. A lot of brands today are actually very enamored with getting fans to like their brands, to write about their brands in positive terms. And what you actually find is that while there are a lot of brands that do get fans of some sort, those people that say, I like this brand, never actually come back to that page that that brand is. Very, very few people do. So what ends up happening is the only way that people leverage that fan base is that when they advertise on Facebook, Facebook actually puts the fact that a particular fan liked their brand, they put it through their newsfeed, and so they get more people to be able to see it. Now, what we found from studying about 3 brands that have leveraged this, and those are Southwest Airlines, Bing search engine, and Starbucks, is that it is a mistake to just look at the fans, that there is really actually an amplification effect, which is the friends of the fans. And again, Facebook has figured this out, and they have some smart products that will help you actually leverage this. So, for example, if we were to look at Southwest, their fans account for about 0.4% of their audience. But then when the message is broadcast and it's put in the news feeds and it says, so-and-so, your friend liked this ad, the fans and friend combination almost doubles. Bing actually is almost doubles again, and Starbucks goes up by 50%. Starbucks actually has more fan than those 2 brands. And when you look at it in terms of earned impressions, in terms of how many times the brand is being mentioned or an advertising of the brand is being seen, and you look at them in terms of kind of what effect do they have. One of the metrics that we use is, do they actually go to the brand site? What we find is that what we find is that the earned impressions actually also tend to skew towards fans and friends, and a company can actually double the effect of the exposures by reaching out to fans, but also by amplifying it through their friends. And then when we look at the effectiveness of social mentions, we see that there is actually quite a bit of improvement in terms of response to the advertising. When you're first advertising to the fans, it makes sense because those are already favorable to the brand, but also to their friends, which is kind of surprising. What that means is that if you get a communication saying that your friends like this, you tend to react more positively to that than just seeing an ad on its own. So that's what I have in terms of some of our learnings on this, but what I would like to ask Jack is where his company tries to help a lot of brands talk to consumer better, is how he thinks branding is evolving and how it will be in the 21st century compared to what we're used to before. Jack?
I come from a little different perspective on this. I've come from a public relations firm, Hill & Knowlton, which is currently known as Hill & Knowlton Strategies. Hill & Knowlton's the oldest, one of the oldest and largest in the world, 86 offices in 68 countries. And I came to this position about a year ago by merger of a company I founded called Public Strategies. That's significant for this discussion because of the fact that I have a little different perspective on branding than perhaps is traditional. I think that there is a public, and the public now is an integral part of the exchange between the consumer and a product. So therefore, I believe branding is no longer just about the exchange between the consumer and a product. I think that in the 21st century, when you have 750 million people on Facebook, and you have a phenomenon that I call disintermediation, meaning that increasingly the public is less and less inclined to enter an exchange with a company or a product because of advertising or because of the perception that it's been validated, then that puts an extra challenge on that company or an extra challenge on that exchange. I think that branding becomes in that exchange something in the 21st century that is going to in effect have a new pipeline. The traditional exchange between the public and a company is beyond now what you might see in a newspaper or what you might see on an advertising on a television set or what you might see in terms of the traditional forms of advertising. I think increasingly there's a new channel, and the internet, I think, has provided that channel. So I think when you talk about branding, you're really talking in the future not just about branding. Branding was always one of the things you did in a company. In many cases, it was a box you checked to say you had done your branding. Today, it's a critical part of the entire being of a company. The reason for that, I think, is that increasingly because of disintermediation, as I call it, and it's been called, I think people are taking a more skeptical view. So when you look at branding today, it's really a broader platform. It is branding that asks the question, what about leadership? Who are the leaders in this business? Who are the leaders in the company? People want to know about the values of a company. And the way in the 21st century, as we see now around the world, the way they are looking at a company is they're looking at the leadership. They're looking at the values of the leadership. They're not just looking at the product. So when we talk about branding now, I think it's very, very important that you talk about branding in the context of a much broader public. And what I've tried to do in the last year in taking over Hill & Knowlton is to head in a direction where we can provide wisdom to people about understanding the public. And branding becomes an integral part of that, but it's not the primary tactic.
Thanks, Jack. Maybe you could share with the audience any situation where you have seen branding. Hi. Hi. You have seen this phenomenon of using the internet enhance the position of a brand has been successful?
Well, one of the things I've done is that I've borrowed some of the tactics and some of the practices from politics. In the U.S., we put in charge of our digital offering a young man who was the architect of the Obama campaign digital and social media platform. We have located in our Dubai office a young man who did the same thing for Prime Minister Cameron in London, because I think that if you really want to look at social media and digital and you want to look at it in the cutting edge, one way to really learn how it's being used across society is to look at what's happening in the world of politics or in the world of activism. And I think we all have an obligation to understand that, and I think we also have an opportunity to understand it. So when I look for examples, I try to look forward, and I think one of the ways you can look at examples in a forward-looking way is to study those examples, because I think that's really cutting edge.
Great. Well, we were joined by Paul Humphrey from Pirelli, who I guess you use. Pirelli is a tire company, and you specialize in overseeing motorsport. I hope you didn't have a flat tire coming to the event here. I understand you have some a video and some PowerPoint slides you would like to talk about?
Yeah, sure. We'll see how we get on. Thank you very much, everybody. I wanted to come today to explain how Pirelli uses motorsport, Formula One in particular, as part of our brand strategy. I mean, the brand for a company like Pirelli has been an important element of our business for well over 100 years. And I think you can all imagine, a tire is a distressed purchase. I don't think anybody's really too happy to go out and buy a tire. It's something that is an expenditure, and sometimes you really can't see the value in those tires, maybe if they're really bald and you're aquaplaning. But generally speaking, we have a commodity product that tends to be quite boring. But Pirelli, as a view on brand, global premium leader. Global, our brand needs to be global because our business is very much global. We want to convey a clear message all around the world of who we are and what we mean. Premium. Now, we have a lot of competitors in our business, and it's a very mature business. People have been making tires for over 100 years. So there's a lot of competitors. Some come and go. Some have been there more consistently. But where we create our value and where our business works best is in the premium segment. And leader. If you're working in the premium segment, you have to be number one. You have to show something different. Now, people today, when they're going to buy products, they want a plus. It's not just about price, maybe service or delivery. They want to feel they're getting something more. Now, you'll see some attributes there regarding feedback we get from people about our products, and you wouldn't really associate those with tires. Maybe sporty, but prestigious, glamorous, cool. I mean, those are really strange expressions to have when you're talking about a tire. But these are all parts of the way we've worked with our business over the years to create our positioning. What's even more important is that by working in this way, we're able also to create an impact of our brand on the purchaser. We're able to make the purchaser want to buy our brand. And we have these evaluations that we make each year going through to our end consumers, and that's still growing. A lot of that is actually to do with Formula One. Just after 1 year of Formula One, this is a survey taken amongst a group of people that know we're in Formula One, and you can see again wonderful attributes that you just would not attribute to a tire maker. And for us, I mean, we do have other aspects. We have the Pirelli calendar, which is a fashion glamorous article. We have a clothing range. This is all part of positioning our company in the premium top segment of our business, because that creates value. So even just after one season of Formula One, the likelihood of someone purchasing our tires has grown by 72%. So these are powerful figures. And these are places and areas where people would be dying to find the key to success, particularly in a mature business like we have. And we were quite, I think, pleasantly surprised, ultimately, of the impact this has. A lot of that is to do with our approach to Formula One. we didn't turn up and just become a tyre supplier and put the tyres on the car and go. We actually changed, and some of you may or may not be fans of Formula One, but we actually changed the way in which the sport was presented with the tyre maker. At the racing weekend, the tyre maker now is a very critical part of the strategy of the race weekend, and it's how the teams and drivers use their tyres that make the show. Now, what does make the show mean? Well, last year there was more overtaking in Formula One than there's ever been in the history of Formula One, nearly 1,500 overtaking manoeuvres, and fans love overtaking. And the vast majority of that overtaking was put down to the way we approached our tyre supply agreement. We made the tyre choices aggressive. In reality, they wear out very quickly. You know, we're changing tyres after 100 kilometres. We had people wondering, well, gosh, that's terrible. You know, your end consumer will worry that your tyres wear out all the time. Well, the end consumer isn't actually stupid, and we just heard a very good comments about social networking. If we did have problems with our tyres wearing out in 100 kilometres, then clearly we wouldn't sell anything ever. The public as well is also very intelligent. Something else we've learned from Formula One, and also through social networking, is that the public has a great need for information and data and knowledge, far more than we would have anticipated. Wanting every little detail, wanting to know, from our point of view, how tyres are made, how they're transported, what trucks we use, amazing details. And that, again, is something that I don't think if we'd sat in a room many years before, we would have ever come up with ideas of what the public really wants. Okay, we believe, in terms of analysis, that we've added 300 million euros to the value of our brand. Bear in mind, we are a tyre company. We do work in the niche, as I said, where we're in the automotive world. We're the only visible brand on a car that is not the manufacturer itself. So again, that's another unique position. But we've seen a very positive impact on our involvement in a sporting environment. Our brand value for us is an element that we manage very closely every year. Yeah, the number, 2.2 billion, big, small, it doesn't really matter. For in our business, it's important that we evaluate that and the impact of our actions having on that brand. I think that's the message I'm trying to convey there, that it's very important to manage your brand because you can create a strong business case in terms of positioning yourself in the premium segment because the public will recognize what you've done with your brand, and that leads to, of course, much greater profitability. Now, just to finish, we have a video, and this will give you an idea of how our brand is conveyed within the world of Formula One.
June 24th, 2010, Formula One was looking for further excitement. So it came to us. 9 months to bring entertainment back to the track. We created a team of specialists from 12 countries. In just 8 weeks, the first prototypes were ready. We went to Izmit, Turkey to produce them. 6 compounds to make every lap exciting, and tests confirm it. We've reached a perfect control on tire wear. It's a big win. Men give life to technology. March 27th, 2011, the engines turn on. After 20 years, Pirelli is back in Formula One. And everyone can see the difference. The stats leave everyone speechless, except Bernie Eccleston, who announces, "I think the true winner is Pirelli." We're already working on tomorrow's show. Stay tuned. Prepare to be thrilled.
So I think the point there is how we're trying to show that it is just a tyre, but it goes well beyond that. And we've had significant recognition right at the point of sale of, oh, Pirelli, they're the people that are in Formula One. And they see the excitement, they see that we go beyond just supplying something that's round and black as a distress purchase.
Well, we're talking about smart brand. That's certainly a pretty smart tactic. What I was wondering is, what worked for you before that's different from what worked for other suppliers of tires that did participate in Formula One?
That's a very good question. And at the heart of that is what I would describe as our aggressive approach to supplying the tires. What happened maybe in the previous years before we joined was that the teams would put on a set of tires and they would finish the race, essentially. Right. What we did was make the tires wear out very quickly. They have a degradation in performance. And what that does is create a strategy where the teams have got to manage their tires, the drivers have got to manage their tires. So they're talking about us. You know, the commentators are saying, oh, wow, look, you know, this isn't a procession anymore. There is overtaking, there is excitement. So what we brought to it, in essence, was excitement and a little bit more passion for the sport and giving the fans what they've been asking for. So it was courageous because the easy option, of course, would be just to replicate what had gone on before and sat back and maybe just relied on the branding in the circuit, which is a little bit old-fashioned from many points of view, as we just heard, but it doesn't really convey anything about our brand. And what we wanted to show is that we could dominate the tyre wear and the degradation to create a very precise show that met the demands of the promoter.
So that's interesting because what you actually did is the opposite of what consumers want, which is that their tires are not wearing out as quickly as they should. And in a lot of cases, you know, you do have consumers making comments in blogs and reviews and so on. How did that work for you? And did you actually, on balance, find positives or negatives?
Well, you know, obviously we did discuss that at the start of the project as one of the risk factors involved in the project. But we felt that it was more important to bring something different, otherwise we'd be the same as everybody else. And certainly at the start of the season, if you'd seen me this time last year, I was looking a little bit more worried about life than I am now, but it was a big project and with those risks involved. However, as the season progressed, people understood. And we did a lot of work on communication, explaining why we were doing and what we were doing. And funny enough, at the end of the season, we actually made one choice that went back to maybe what had happened before, and we had huge criticism for being boring and being very negative. So in the space of less than a year, we'd taken what was potentially a negative and was now a positive. And we now actively have people begging us, including drivers, teams, the public, to be very aggressive and give them excitement. So that's been a very good turnaround. But at the basis of that, of course, is communication. We did a heck of a lot of work explaining to people, particularly the major media players, the commentators, what we were doing and why we were doing it. I think that's also important. You've got to explain why you're doing things, not just do it.
So Paul, if you are faced in a situation like this where you have to advise a client how you walk the fine line, what would you have advised them?
Well, I think what I saw here today, I think they don't need a lot of advice. I think they've got it just right.
Thank you.
Okay.
And I think that's it, taking some risks sometimes. You know, we're in a mature business. You know, there are a lot of brands. I mean, Formula One, you see brands like Red Bull who have used Formula One very successfully, been very winning. And in the automotive business, you see companies like BMW, what they've done with Mini, for example. They took an old name and brand and have made it into almost a lifestyle product. So there are a number of examples in our business and Formula One of people taking what are essentially existing or let's say mature business areas and being able to reinvent them and give them something more than anyone could possibly imagine.
Well, that's really fitting because we're talking about entrepreneurship in this conference, and clearly it shows that large established companies can use creativity and entrepreneurship to be able to build their business. So it's certainly not just the venue for individual entrepreneurs. I think we have about 10, 12 minutes left, and I would like to open it up to the audience for some questions. Are there?
Hello. Thank you for the presentations. I have a small brand that started 5 years ago, and I'm very proud of it. Baby Fitehi, and I'm celebrated as one of the, I'm going to get an award hopefully in half an hour. However, I started something, I saw the numbers of the internet usage, And I saw that in 2009, internet users in Saudi Arabia were 5% of the population. However, right now they're 41%. So taking what Babson has told me, I'm a Babson alumni, I just acted. So 1 year ago, I started building the e-commerce brand website without any intermediate service provider, directly from our website. And we went with the best PR company, and we gathered all the media and print and on TV, and we started this thing 2 months ago. Unfortunately, I didn't sell any piece until now, within 2 months, although I have 15 shops all over Saudi Arabia and Bahrain and Kuwait right now, and unfortunately I did not find the response. My question, the numbers that you showed might be a Western brand, might be for Western brands. I wonder if e-commerce would pick up in Saudi Arabia, and I wonder if you have any experience about e-commerce in developing countries and third world countries. Is there something I could learn? I could do other than giving the awareness to the public. Is there something else, or it's just a matter of time and things will pick up by time? Thank you.
Well, I'm not sure I know the specifics of the brand and what activities you had to do. I mean, I do think that a lot of e-commerce companies have been very successful. If you think about the phenomenon of the internet, you have people on eBay called power sellers. There are over 1 million of them that are basically small entrepreneurs who were able to leverage a channel of distribution to advertise and sell a product. A lot of advertisers in Google, there are millions of them, do the same thing. So maybe you can tell us.
I sell jewelry for children newborn.
Jewelry, okay. Any ideas on?
Well, I think the question about the developing countries, I happen to agree with that. I, being an entrepreneur, have spent a good deal of money in the last 12 months setting up a digital practice and headquartered it in Dubai for a region, in our case, that includes the Middle East, Africa, Australia, and India. So I believe that there is a vibrant economy that will be driven by the exchange and what I call really a new pipeline. And that pipeline is going to be over the internet. The key to that, though, is by doing it right. And I also think the key is measurement, as we've talked about here today. There are too many people selling those services without measurement. So I also built in a research component to it because I believe that it's about numbers and it's about return on investment. And so I agree with you that there is a need for this in a developing market, but I think there's a need to do it right, and which is why I've taken the time to put the expertise in place.
Okay, maybe we can go to another questions. Question here, maybe?
Hi, my question to Mr. Jack. Now we saw a presentation from Pirelli explaining how did they succeed when they interfered with Formula One. I know that your company maybe advised them or advised other companies to take those steps. But I'm sure that now Michelin can do us the same presentation evaluating the positive sides of leaving Formula One. So here on the stage, I see somebody who do the strategies, that's you, and somebody who executed, and somebody who evaluate by analysis. So a company like you, how do you advise Michelin or Pirelli to take this step?
Well, I'm happy to say we didn't advise in either case to leave, or Pirelli's done quite well. but I think, again, it's about numbers. I think I'm very passionate about the fact that we're in an era right now where people are more critical, and they are more cautious than ever before. I think this whole idea of disintermediation means that people are having a hard time in business and in other areas of knowing who they can turn to and what they can trust. I think it's about numbers. If your particular brand, if you've got an audience or you've got a customer base or you've got a public that you think this kind of an affiliation like they have with Formula One is to your advantage based on hard data, then I would advise you to do it. In too many cases, it's not based on hard data, to be frank. And so you see in some cases, you see affiliations such as this that are not thought out well. I don't know what the motivation was for Michelin to withdraw, nor do I know the data that caused Pirelli to join. But I think that remember that this public that we're dealing with is no longer just about brands. It's about a public that is skeptical and they are yearning for leadership. And if you can find data that shows a particular affiliation shows, whether it be in the sports area or in people that follow Formula One or a soccer team, it's got to be about data.
Let me just add one thing, which is that we see over and over again that when you compare the importance of the medium versus the importance of the message and what you say to the consumer, the message is actually, in terms of power, is about 4 times to 1 more important than the media. And in fact, when you look at across a lot of different situations, about half the advertising on TV actually shows no effect, which basically goes to tell you that you know, whether it is the internet that you're using or whether it is TV or whether it is a sponsorship, it really all has to do with what you say, whether it is engaging and convincing to the consumer and overcome some of the increasing skepticism by users everywhere, particularly the ones that are armed with information about the product and what other people say.
I think I would only add to that that, well, one, our turnover grew by 23% last year, so it has a pretty good impact at the moment. You can't do a straight line correlation, but we know it's had a big impact, and in the premium segment, we can't meet demand. A lot of factors, of course, involved in any business that's doing that, from an industrial strategy, from a product strategy, but in terms of brand, we entered Formula One because we recognized we were becoming slightly alienated from a younger audience. There was a younger audience in the world that didn't know about us. It's one of the few products, it's the only global world championship that happens every year. It has a big presence in Asia, which is one of our big growth markets. It's going to Russia, 2 races in the US, again areas where we're growing heavily. So it matched our business strategy, and you're quite right, you have to measure that result. It's sometimes not easy to measure, but it doesn't stop you trying to measure it. It also qualifies us in the premium segment of the market, which is where we've recognized the automotive world is growing more rapidly in the premium segment, which is our segment. During the recessions, well, the two, if you want to take double dip, but in both recessions, the premium automotive sector has continued growing at a rapid rate. So it's a qualification process as well for a brand that also wants to play at the top level. And it stops as well other people, new players wanting to come in. People need to remember that 10 years ago, 12 years ago, Bridgestone was a smaller company than Pirelli. It's now 4 times the size. And a lot of their people would put that down to their involvement in Formula One. So it is true, though. I think the good point you made was that you need to know why you're doing it. It's not just doing it. Sponsorship often is a motive. It's often down to the CEO being in love with a certain sport and wanting to be present there, rather than any cold-hearted sort of business evaluation. So,
great, thank you. We have another question here.
Yes, please. You mentioned the word measures, and if we talk about the digital media, especially the social digital media, what kind of measures we should look at? I mean, it's quite new for me, and I think for all of us. So, is there any measures that we should be more looking at? Not only the fans and the thing, but what other things that we should focus on?
Sure. Well, it really depends on the objective of what you're trying to do. So, for example, if you're doing search, it's relatively easy to measure. It's kind of how many clicks do you get on your search campaign and whether those convert. So that's a direct response medium. It's fairly easy to measure, although I would hasten to say that there is an effect that we see on search that's kind of latent. It's not doesn't happen just when somebody clicks. It could happen a week later or even up to 4 weeks later. If, on the other hand, you are trying to advertise a brand, the ultimate luxury is to be able to measure the impact on sales, which is what I showed in the case of these FMCG brands. But there are surrogates like, and I think Paul mentioned one. Is it, how aware are you of the brand? Did your brand increase its awareness? Are people more favorable toward your brand? Are they more likely to recommend it? Those are softer measures, are not as easily translatable to dollars and cents, but they will give you some idea of whether what you're looking for, which in the branding case, you're trying to make people more aware, more favorable, whether that's actually working or not. Maybe one last question. Over.
Yes, I would appreciate if you can elaborate on the branding effect on recruitment and employee retention.
Anybody wants to take that?
Well, people make the mistake today of thinking that you can silo these things in a company. That as far as perceptions of the company, that human resources are that your employees are a different group than your customers, or your employees are a different group than the broader public. Again, in part because of the explosion of the internet, your recruits and your employees are essentially getting the same information everybody else is. So the impact of this on recruitment is that if you take the position that your reputation is your reputation broadly, that has a direct impact, I believe, on recruitment and employees. We've done a great deal of research about communications with employees and communications among recruits. And in almost every instance, you can see a direct correlation between your broader image and the impact it's having on that. Too many people make the mistake of thinking your own employees are going to have a different view than perhaps the public does. In some cases they do. In most cases they do not. They're concerned about their neighbors, their friends, their associates' perceptions of where they work, just like any person is. So I advocate strongly, don't treat it as a silo, because there's one public.
Let me, so I'll add a couple of things to that. One is that the internet actually makes it a little bit easier to recruit, in the sense that you can actually zero in on the types of people that you want, and you can be at least more targeted. Now, the opposite is true, which is other people will try to find out about your employees by looking at their social network profiles. But the second thing is that it goes to reputation, which is that it's harder now to manipulate your reputation, and the reason is that there are all these sites where people go and they write comments about your company and what it is like to work for it. and you have to take some of it with a grain of salt because it has a tendency to have people that have been, that have left the company for whatever reason, so in some cases they're negative. But I think, you know, the smart users will be able to discern, you know, some of the things that they are really looking for. And you have to be aware of that. You have to be aware of that, and you have to be taking active steps to correct any misperceptions that are created that are beyond your control.
Question is about the brand and how you manage to be serving the brand. Your brand is power, is nothing without control. But people may be buying the tires for different reasons. And you think that you're building a brand around that, but actually people are buying it for different reasons. So brand accountability, and how do you measure that you are actually working to the brand versus this gap that you may realize a few years later that you are off?
Yeah, I mean, part of the reason we went into Formula One was to recognize a gap that we had. I mentioned we were becoming a little bit distant from the younger fan and audience. A lot of our surveys showed that people recalled us maybe being in Formula One 20 or 30 years ago, and a lot of other brands had started taking on the younger audience. But in particular, I should have maybe mentioned gaming, which for us is also a very important aspect of our branding. When we're looking at young players, you know, the Formula One games, GT racing games have very powerful impact on, and I'm sure one day, you know, those gaming consoles will be asking for a lot of money to have your brand on the game because you've got millions of children with repetition of brand coming up. All right, maybe it doesn't explain what your brand does, but certainly the recognition is very, very high, we've seen. So we do try and analyze where we feel we want to be as a brand. Of course, you can't please everyone. You know, so there's always going to be somebody saying, well, you know, you're positioning yourself there. Are you maybe leaving behind another part of your potential audience? The reality is yes, because you can't be everything to everyone. Otherwise, you don't mean anything. So from our point of view, we do recognize that there are some people that maybe feel we're maybe too expensive, we're maybe too much of a premium product, but they would have bought something else anyway. Because your only answer to that is then trying to provide an alternative low-cost solution. But the cost of, say, making a tire is going to be largely equal between any of the tire producers, be it a low-cost country or ourselves globally, because the raw materials, they're all coming from one place. So the only way you can effectuate an improvement in your business profit is to command a premium for your technology and premium for your brand, or you start playing just at raw material prices, and to be honest, that you're all going to disappear. So you'll find that all of our major competitors, probably the top 5 tire makers, working with the premium, and they let go a large part of the market simply because it has no value to us. So to answer your question is we select where we want to be, we monitor where we want to be, and we will keep pushing to be in that segment because it's the way we will make money as a business.
Okay, with that, I would like to thank the panelists and thank the audience for your questions and your attendance.